Welcome to TechVets The Podcast, a show dedicated to exploring the world of tech and cybersecurity through the eyes of industry leaders and ex-forces personnel. In this show, we're talking to Johnny Mercer MP, former Minister for Defence, People and Veterans, and a veteran himself. Johnny, you left the services just in time to become an MP, which seems a pretty dramatic change from a military career. Is that what you intended?
So it's not what I intended, no. I never voted before I became an MP. I had no interest in politics and a fairly dim view of politicians. So it absolutely wasn't my intention. But for me, I think we're all shaped by our experiences, and certainly, mine during the Afghanistan years were very formative. And I felt that this country needed to do better towards military veterans. And I thought, there's lots of different ways you can try and influence that. You can work for one of the brilliant charities like Help for Heroes or Walking with the Wounded, or you can work in the local authority. But then I thought of MPs, and I thought, if I had that platform, I'd use it every day to bang this drum. So I thought I'd do it myself, yeah.
So can I ask, was there a kind of damascene conversion? Was there a moment when you were a soldier where you said, right, that's it, I need to be an MP?
I suppose there wasn't a damascene conversion. It was something I was continuing to think about for quite a long time. Certainly when I was serving, I operated in lots of different units, and one of them I had fairly regular contact with ministers. And my view was that these people had a very sort of privileged position, and I couldn't understand why some of them didn't use it more. So that was a kind of residual thought. But yeah, certainly in 2012, we lost more of our service personnel and veterans to suicide than we did to the conflict in Afghanistan, which was still, reasonably high intensity at that stage. And I just thought at that stage, something's got to change. I can't believe that was 9 years ago now, but I thought something's got to change, and I'm going to try and do it.
Well, your subsequent career has shown you doing that. Can I bring in you, James Murphy, Chief Executive of TechVets? Do you often come across military personnel planning to leave who exhibit the kind of confidence, self-confidence that Johnny does?
Yes, I suppose so. I mean, one point that I'm quite keen on making regularly is that it's not a homogenous body. So you take that group of people leaving the military every year, that sort of 14 plus thousand, you're always going to get a very wide range of characters within that. However, one thing that's really sort of hammered home into and developed within all of the people within the MOD as part of the sort of core competencies that the MOD likes to focus on is their ability to have an objective, plan to meet that objective, and deliver it. So I think what people will have is a confidence if they understand what their mission is, if they understand where they're going, what that pathway looks like, then they'll certainly be confident enough about seeing that through. However, the issue that we tend to get is that people don't necessarily have all the information. They don't necessarily have all of the support they need to make that information, that more informed decision when they're building that plan when they leave. So actually, they tend not to have the end result that someone like Johnny has had, or myself, or many others. There are a lot of people there that are falling through the cracks because what seems like a great idea and they're confident about it hasn't necessarily had the right support when they've made that decision.
I think confidence is if I can just come in now, I think confidence is a really interesting part of this conversation, because I wasn't confident at all. And if anything, I've seen overconfidence bring not the sort of results that people deserve from coming out of the military. So I don't think it's a confidence thing. I genuinely expected to fail at almost every turn. It was just a capacity to deal with that failure and be able to sort of stare it down, if you like, that kept me going. It was a focus on a greater cause, I think, which ties in around, with the service and the nature of service life. So I don't think it's a confidence. I think it's a grit. I think, when I've seen really capable people come out of the military and then fall over, sometimes that, more often than not, there's been a degree of overconfidence there. So I think confidence is the wrong word. Assuredness, humility, really, to accept that life is very different outside the military. I did it, like I said, I expected to fail at every turn. I'm just incredibly lucky I haven't. I've gone, I basically like a ping pong ball, and I bounced off and bounced off and bounced off. But it doesn't all end very well. I mean, I got sacked 3 weeks ago in the most public way possible. So, it's the ability to deal with these challenges, I think, that you learn in the military that helps you so much.
Well, I don't mean, I think I consciously didn't use the word self-belief, because what's strange about you perhaps is that you had a very strong belief in a cause, almost a sort of single issue belief, and that's what seemed, if I read your story correctly, to have driven you to have become an MP and done the work you now do. I mean, is that fair to say?
I think so, yeah. I certainly always have that underlying motivation. I think that that is my binary sort of accountability factor, if you see what I mean. So whatever I do, I try and do it within the boundaries of representing people that I've come here to do. Being in politics isn't about me. It's not about me building a name or any of that rubbish. And focusing on that, I guess, has sort of made me different in a way, and given me the opportunities that I've had. I think a lot of people go into politics because they want to be someone, whereas I've always thought it was a way to kind of do things and get things done. And I found that contrast quite painful at times, but it certainly served me well in what I've tried to do. But it's not been a bed of seamless success by any stretch.
But it did drive you very rapidly into a ministerial career, which, if you look at some of the blowhards in politics who would like to be ministers, perhaps it's because they're overburdened with self-belief rather than belief in something they want to do.
I think so, but there's no, let's not pretend there's any sort of meritocracy when it comes to being a minister. I mean, there are lots of qualities, I think, that prime ministers look for in their ministerial teams. I'm not sure competence is the defining factor, should we say.
James, does this ring true with the kind of people you come across at TechVets who want to transition out of the services?
Yes, I suppose generally. I mean, we're looking at people who they're passionate about something, they're driven by something, and cybersecurity and technology does provide them almost that mission, that being part of something slightly bigger, whether they are defending people's assets or identities, or whether they are creating something technological to better society. Having that mission and drive gives them that purpose. And I think as individuals, that's something that's relatively standard with most of the military. Most people join the military because they want to be part of something slightly bigger. So I think that's important. And I think what you also find with military, generally speaking, and I am generalizing, is that they are relatively humble and they want to be part of something. They're willing to muck in, and it's not always about them. It's about being part of something and working hard to achieve it. So I think that does stand many of them out from some of their peers, their non-military peers.
But Johnny, do your colleagues from the military who have now left, I mean, have they? I'm sorry to keep on going in on this point about belief in something, but have they been driven in the same way, or have they just kind of bumbled into another career? How do you describe them?
I think they have been driven by different motivations. I think we all have our own different motivational causes, don't we? And some, for example, go into the security, and some I know people who've gone into cybersecurity for the reasons that James just outlined, an exciting arena, if you like, where you're learning new skills, and it's the opportunity to do something completely different from the military, but at the same time learn new skills in a kind of in a way a kind of combative environment where you're trying to learn faster and better than other people to protect yourself from cyber threats and things like that. So I've seen people go into different things, but with the same sort of core values, I think, that you certainly learn in the military. I think that's what really stands people in good stead. And I definitely see those who forget those core values fall over pretty quickly.
Can you outline what you're doing at the moment to help veterans in their lives after the military? What are you up to?
Well, today, not very much, but generally speaking, I mean, my this was my reason for going into politics, right? So I've tried to champion their causes throughout. I've focused on things like lawfare, which is the judicialization of operations in retrospect, and basically going around banging on doors trying to take money off private soldiers for things that they didn't do in Iraq and Afghanistan. I focused, clearly that is now bleeding across into the Northern Ireland conflict, where there's a real attempt to kind of rewrite history. I'm not pretending everybody did everything well and right and all the rest of it, but I'm not a fan of prosecuting people in their 80s and 90s just because they can't remember things. I've also, focused really hard on care pathways and how people actually access help in the veterans space. So there is quite a lot of help for veterans now. It's very different to, certainly in the early days of Afghanistan, 2006, 7, 8. There's some amazing groups out there now. The explosion of people like Help for Heroes has been amazing, and the British public have really leaned in to supporting her veterans. But government seems to have this continual mental block. And, when you talk about care pathways and real sort of command and control and sort of authentication within the veterans care space, that is a role for government, but government has traditionally had its priorities elsewhere. So I obviously managed to get this Prime Minister to set up the Office for Veterans Affairs. Unfortunately, it wasn't quite prioritised as I hoped, and but I hope with me leaving that will change, and that will be the opportunity that I hoped it was, to bring a bit of professionalism to the sector, so that those who are taking their lives and saying there's no help available or struggling to get into employment, actually they know where to turn, and they know who to ask for help, and they know how to access brilliant trade pathways like you've got with TechVets, or care pathways when it comes to mental health and things like that.
I think the Office of Veteran Affairs was that's a huge success. For me, having an office that is there that can really bring those issues of the day to light, but also start to really concentrate on I hate the term horizon scanning, but those future emerging issues that veterans could be facing. I think that's really, really important. And the other point you mentioned, though, around authentication, I think that is one of the most important aspects of our time, because we are now looking at overload of data. There's, if you look at, the service charities, they're popping up. You can have hundreds within a postcode, and many of them are doing the same sort of thing. They're all great organisations, but having one place where you can come to get, I know we have Veterans Gateway, but there's a lot of work that can be done with that sort of single sign-on authentication to make it easier for people to access stuff with a really positive gateway that puts people to the right stuff at the right time. I think that's something that I would love to see as a next step. And I'm sure with everything that's happening, I'm sure that'll be on the radar somewhere.
Johnny, you have, I think I'm right in saying, you have criticised some of the pathways out of the military, particularly charities and what they do. Is that right?
I'm not sure I've criticised charities per se. I think I have entered the debate in trying to bring a bit of order to the charity space, where, for me, certainly between 2011 and 2016, £972 million worth of libel funds went into the charity sector. And yet at the end of that process, we still did not have clear, defined care pathways for those who need it. It's all right, people like me and James talking about all the options available for veterans. If you're working in Plymouth and you come out the military and you're trying to find, you've left and you don't know people in the military, and 3 years, 4 years later, you start having dramas with your mental health, that, how we mark our homework on that is how easy is it for him or her to access mental health care pathways, and it is still too opaque. So yes, I have been critical in some spaces, but it's only because I make no apology for being a kind of relentless voice of the men and women who serve, and for some of them, I'm afraid, although there are care pathways, that there is care available, accessing it is still a real challenge, and I think there's a duty on charities to work together. They used to sort of use this term of cooperation and so on as a nice thing at the end of a board meeting, right? It's now absolutely mandatory because money in the sector is going down so fast, but demand is going up. So yes, I've definitely challenged the charities, but I wouldn't be critical of them. I think they've certainly bailed out my generation of veterans over the years after such a appalling showing from government, really.
It's such an important voice to have, though. There's a reason why I wanted TechVets to become a program within RFEA. And RFEA Forces Employment Charity is there to provide that employment support. So why would TechVets work independently of it? Why would we not work together to make sure that if people want to come for employment, they can in one place, but then access specific focused programs if they need to? And I think that's something that's been a bit of a success for us over the last couple of years. But yeah, I see it all too often. There's so many different things popping up, and as a service leaver in late 2018, early 2019, I had a 5-year plan, and when I left, I was still met with this wall of data. I didn't know where to go, what to do. Who would I speak to if X, Y, and Z happened? And it's really difficult to get that.
How much of this, Johnny, was came from your own experience of leaving the services? How much of that can you draw from in your new position of kind of weaponising the post-minister position?
So it didn't really come from my own experience, because I sort of stumbled out of the services and into this, kind of expecting to fail at any stage. I did a number of different things. I worked on building sites to raise money for my campaign and stuff like that. So it wasn't really on my experiences, but I have always felt sort of very strongly for those who come out and have not been as lucky as me. And I feel that, I guess, I loved serving with these people. I saw what we asked them to do, and particularly the period 06 through to 10, 11 on operations, and I just thought they deserved better than they got. It was as simple as that. And that, coupled with a kind of, the putrid nature of politicians talking a really good game, and then guys stumbling around for employment or mental health care, that contrast, if you like, really lit me up, and that's what's kept me going for about 10 years now.
You are extraordinarily driven on this subject. I do have to ask one light question though. Is it true you had a job in a Dove soap ad to fund your political campaign?
It is true, yeah. It is true. I was in the shower, gel advert, yeah. And literally, I have no shame with this stuff. I mean, they gave me quite a bit of money for standing in a shower for 4 hours, so I'm not even sorry.
No, that's fantastic.
Is it Googleable, or has the Tory party machine had it redacted?
Man, I don't recommend Googling it.
Good. Can I just go back to those days, because that moment where you leave the relatively ordered world of the services and you go into another career, and for you that meant standing as an MP for the Conservatives in Plymouth, which at the time was a Labour seat. I remember working for a mate Adam Holloway, who had come out of the services a few years before, was standing for the first time in Gravesham, and he overturned a Labour MP there, and it was a magical moment. It was absolutely terrific, but the stress and horror that led up to it was ghastly. How did you cope?
I think okay, because I was very new to it all, right? So it kind of had that novelty as well, like knocking on someone's door and talking about politics. I mean, the only thing that's worse than that is knocking on someone's door and talking about religion, right? So I literally had to, kind of learn a new way of life. And I found, if I'm honest, so I fought in Afghan in 2006, 8, 9, 10. So, when I came back, I was just pining for a sort of normal life with my wife and kids. And I just quite enjoyed getting in the van every day, driving to Plymouth, banging on doors, hanging around my wife. And, and she's a lot better than me at this stuff. I mean, she would be the real family success story, but, I can't be left with the responsibility of children. So I sort of have to go and front it at the moment. But she's a lot better than me. And I still think most people in Plymouth actually think they're voting for her, not for me. So she's the real sort of secret to the success, without a doubt.
Well, there's a real sense of team in all of this, isn't there? Which, again, I think somebody with a services background probably gets more than everybody else. And with Adam's campaign, I mean, the most sensible thing he did was bring in a Gurkha to run the campaign for him. So, I mean, I'll trivialise and say all he had to do was walk up and down with a terrier.
I know lots of people who do that, who get their old sergeant majors to come in and run the campaign. I mean, it is hilarious. The experiences you'll have. I mean, I know we can't swear on this podcast, but literally someone opening the door and telling you to F off, without you even opening your mouth is a life affirming experience. They literally can't stand the sight of you, but they've never spoken to you before. All these things are brilliant.
James, I guess moving into cybersecurity in some ways is slightly less risky than doing what Johnny did. Is that right?
Absolutely. You can face whatever cyber threat every day, but you never have to open the door and physically face it, which is wonderful. But yeah, I think I totally see what Johnny's saying there, and I think when most people leave, that semblance of normality is something that is quite common with people seeking, and family stuff as well. And I left and straight away increased hours at work, far more than I'd done in the military. But I'm working from home. I spend more time with my family than I ever have done, despite working far more hours than I ever have done. And it does make a huge difference to be able to really understand your home, your local area, and your community, your family. It's pretty cool. But yeah, I don't envy Johnny at all, knocking on doors.
But he has. I mean, I know he's obviously in the room with us, but he has maximised what he's good at, hasn't he? I mean, that seems to be a message from what he's saying. So he can clearly stand on a doorstep and be sworn at, and still walk away, filled with belief in his cause, can't he?
Absolutely. I mean, but again, I think the sort of skills what we call the soft skills that Johnny would have developed over his military career is no different than what most people would have had the ability to develop. It just depends on the individual. You've got to understand where your strengths lie. You've got to really concentrate throughout your military career on how to develop yourself as an individual and get the most out of your time in the military. But then when you leave, you've got to understand the true self, where your strengths are, where your weaknesses are, but you've also got to understand how to capitalize on that experience that you've had in the military. And I think that's another area where some people fall down. I was lucky. I had some really good mentors. I had a 5-year plan, and I kind of knew what I was going to do. And I focused on my few strengths, mitigated all my many weaknesses. And I think that's important, though. That's really important.
Johnny, can we just go now to some of the horrors that you campaign on and that face veterans when they leave? This idea of your military career coming back to haunt you, and I don't know if you would agree with the language, but because some well-funded lawyer can make a name for themselves out of it, how do we get into this situation, and how do we get out of it?
We got into this situation largely because, it's a multifaceted, it's really common. It's a lot more complicated than people think. So you'll see some pretty average politicians weigh in on this from time to time, saying we need this and we need that, without really understanding what's going on. I think, the biggest culpability is the MOD over the years that hasn't really been resilient against this sort of thing. when this sort of stuff started in Iraq and Afghanistan, just paying out hemorrhaging public money, which drove an industry of human rights lawyers. Essentially we managed to go from them going after the department to actually sort of going after individual soldiers for things that happened. That then has had a pretty devastating effect on some of our people. A lot of people are fine and just, but they'd never come after someone like me. They'd go after someone who was struggling with their experiences. And, essentially what they're looking for is money. I mean, it's all an industry, right? So they, if you look at someone like Phil Shiner, he actually paid someone to drive around Iraq, knocking on doors saying, look, did the British Army annoy you in any way? Yes, I was hit by a soldier on the 7th of March, 2006. The MOD can't disprove it, so it pays out. And this is all legal aid, right? So it's basically like a big cash machine built on the backs of our soldiers. I think Northern Ireland's slightly more complicated because, an incredibly difficult time. But I think this principle that, where there's wrongdoing, clearly you investigate it and you find out what happened. But I think the idea then that you just keep going until these people are dead is probably not the best way to treat your veterans, and something that I feel pretty strongly about.
Is it, as well as the money-making side of it, is there a kind of undercurrent of ideology that's driving this, that as well as trying to bankrupt you, also wants to see the army disbanded? I mean, is that part of it?
I think that I wouldn't go that far. I'd say there's definitely an element that see the British Army as, uncouth, uncontrolled, unprofessional. You join it was either the army or prison. And I just think it's so far away from the reality. Certainly, my experiences when I was serving, with some really deeply special people who demonstrated the sort of highest qualities of service to the country. And now I'm in the political sphere, and people go on about freedom and sacrifice, as they get in their ministerial car and go off for a 5-course lunch in the Ritz. It sticks in the craw a bit. So, I will relentlessly stand up for these people, because that's my experience. That's the reality of it, right? I don't think there was there's ever been a systemic breakdown of values and standards in the military. I think we've got our difficult people, like any big organization. And one of the things we've done wrong is we haven't held ourselves properly to account for, over a number of years, really. I mean, we're the only country that served in Afghanistan who still haven't prosecuted anybody for crimes in Afghanistan. You can't tell me we're the only country that didn't have anyone who did that. So, look, there are systemic problems, right? But I think the current state of play, where we're just hounding old people till they're dead, to try and, particularly in Northern Ireland, it's a deliberate attempt to kind of rewrite history. I went out to the court appearance of a couple of soldiers recently, and the judge, it wasn't even close. It wasn't like the judge was torn as to what he was very clear. He was like, you cannot, this is unlawful. You cannot behave in this way. And it just surprises me that we have to get to that stage before the MOD or the government does anything to protect these people. And those guys had been through 9 years of that. One of them, his wife had died in the process. One of them had a stroke. They couldn't even hear the charges. They were so old. And they just appeared to be totally abandoned. So, we've got a lot of work to do.
James, is this something you come across in TechVets, companies that simply won't work with you because they consider being services personnel to be a kind of demerit activity?
No, because I think businesses are slightly different. This isn't the issues that Johnny's talking about are political or possibly even ideological groups, right? Or fundamentalist groups. However you want to term them. These are people that want something slightly different. Whereas businesses understand that they have not even a responsibility. It makes business sense to employ veterans and service leavers, and they're understanding that a lot more now. So, but at the same time, there's already so many people out there who used to serve in the military that are bringing a great name to the rest of the military. So I think, generally speaking, I've never seen that. I've come across a couple of companies who have asked me questions like, are a lot of them mental? But immediately they're on the back foot and they go bright red and they realise that it's just a slip of words. And and I say, look, I'm thick-skinned, but no. And when I give them the actual stats, and Johnny will be all over these stats, but it's not even a competition. I mean, the stats are almost exactly the same levels as what the percentages are for non-military for some of these mental health issues. So I think generally speaking, I think we've started winning that battle, so to speak. And the amount of companies that come to me very, very keen to employ military because they understand that they've got all those really cool soft skills, but they also come from a background where values and standards, like Johnny mentioned, is ingrained into them. So they're going to be respectful and loyal, and they're going to be great team players. They're going to really be responsible for making decisions, and being accountable for that as well. But they will work hard and deliver on what you ask them to do. And I think that's really important.
Companies can be cowards, though, can't they?
Yeah, I mean, if I can just come in there, the biggest challenge I find with companies is, like James says, the vast majority are absolutely fantastic. The only pushback I've ever had is from smaller companies who feel like they're taking a risk, because the narrative out there is around broken, mad, dangerous veterans, which is, as James has alluded to, like a million miles away from the truth. Any company that actually dips its toe and employs veterans will often tell you it's the best thing they've ever done. So it's, you're right, businesses are callous, and that's why people like Barclays relentlessly go after veterans, because they get very good employees who will stick with them, show that loyalty that they've been shown, and deliver for them over a number of years. So it works kind of both ways. I don't think it's callous. I think it's sort of business sense, and I think it's sensible. But the only pushback is from smaller companies who feel they're taking a risk, and the challenge is to get in that space and change the narrative around veterans that the vast majority are absolutely fine.
It's not just business's responsibility either. There's a lot of the responsibility sits with us to make sure that businesses understand what a military career means, what the specific elements within that career, how that translates, because they've never been in the military. So they're not going to understand straight away what someone who's been a Bowman communication specialist, what does that mean? If they've never used or seen what Bowman communication systems are, they're not going to have any clue. But making sure that I think there's an issue at the moment where people leaving the military, they haven't understood their career in the right way. But that's being worked on. So by the time they leave, it's a bit of a Band-Aid. They're getting a bit of stuff right at the end. They've got to rush to try and translate into something, turn that into some success. Otherwise, they're going to be unemployed. Again, that's the other thing. We quit our job before finding the next one, which is quite weird for non-military people. But we have to do more to make sure that these individuals leaving understand what their skills and strengths are. And look, what we're doing at TechVets is getting beyond the job descriptions and getting them direct engagement with the companies, so the companies can explain what they're about and vice versa. And that's really yielding some success.
And Johnny, there's no problem, is there, with, I suppose a kind of inept government that's on the back foot will at some stage have briefed you that the best thing to do is for you to be quiet about all this and somehow it'll go away. The argument there being that if you keep on talking about this, then a public perception will emerge of the veteran as being a little bit risky. Do you worry about that at all? Is that a problem, or am I extrapolating too much?
Yeah, no, because there's so many good stories out there now about veterans. Look at James. He's come out. He's running this company now. There's some brilliant people at TechVets. There's some great people in that industry. There's companies like TechVets who do some great stuff. So I think people can see for themselves. There's a lot of veterans in employment now. So people will have their own personal experience of employing a veteran and think actually it's a really positive thing to do. So no, I don't think you can bang on about it too much. I think the problem was we weren't banging on about it positively enough. And a narrative was getting out there that all veterans are mad, bad and dangerous to know. I think we're beginning to turn that corner, but there's a lot of work to do.
Johnny, can I start to wrap this up and just pick up where we are with Northern Ireland veterans particularly? Because I think that's your kind of main focus at the moment, isn't it? What's going to happen next and what needs to be done?
Well, the government's been promising for some time some sort of legislation to just bring some integrity to the process. So, raise evidential thresholds so that we're not chasing after people who've been investigated already without any compelling new evidence. And, what that legislation looks like, I'm still waiting to see. It's been promised for a long time and obviously it didn't come in time for those two guys in Belfast. So I left the government. I'm hopeful. I'm ever hopeful, but I will just keep going. I'll run a huge campaign. I'll do marches. I'll do media. I'll do whatever it takes to get something over the line for these people, because I strongly think they deserve it. Their cause is as just as anybody else's in Parliament. It's just that they haven't had a proper voice for a long time. Their voice was not included in the Good Friday Agreement. They were not the party who were represented. And frankly, it wasn't good enough then. It's not good enough now. These problems are always going to happen. And I'll do whatever it takes to change that.
Do you think the government regrets having you as a minister?
Probably everyone who's employed me regretted it in the end, but not at the time. I don't know. No, I don't think so. It depends whether you want people who are going to get stuff done or just sit around, as a soporific jelly warming the seat, for the next person. I imagine most leaders want people who are going to work for them, who are going to get things done. I certainly would. I quite enjoy having difficult characters in my teams who can produce. It's the easiest thing in the world to all get along and end up delivering nothing for the people you care about, and there's absolutely you may as well stay in bed all day. So, I'm obviously I've made plenty of mistakes along the way, but I'm pretty comfortable with my decisions and, we'll keep going.
Brilliant. James, can you be accused of delivering soporific jellies to British industry?
Yeah, that's what we specialise in. It's in the strap.
Johnny, James, thanks for joining us. For our listeners, you can find out more about TechVets and how to become a member by visiting techvets.co or searching for TechVets on LinkedIn. If you're a business owner or work for a company in the tech industry and want to find out how to get more veterans into your team, drop James Murphy a message via LinkedIn. You'll find all the contacts you need in the description for this post. We'll be back next month with another TechVets podcast. Thanks for joining us.